Hi, this is Sandy Park with Berkshire Hathaway and Hudson Valley Nest. Welcome to the Spring Market Smart Series number 2, Declutter. This really affects quite a few people, I believe, whether you are looking to sell your home or you're looking to stay. I found this to be quite relevant in my travels and hope that you find the tips that we share today to be useful for you. I have expert panelist Ellen Kuttner here with me today from Simply Organized. She is a member of the National Association of Professional Organizers. She has over 20 years of experience as a professional organizer and declutterer, as well as a master gardener. Welcome, Ellen.
Hi, Sandy. Thanks so much for inviting me to take part in your webinar today.
Absolutely. So I'm going to start things out to give you a visual. I'm going to actually share my screen right off the bat and kind of give you a notion of how buyers are affected when they come into a home that has clutter, the impact that that can have. And it's not just buyers, it's also the ability to have friends over, anxiety, feeling like you're constantly managing projects. Clutter really has so many different ways of impacting your life. And I'm showing more of how it impacts the real estate sale process, but this really has a number of ways of impacting a person's life. So I'm going to scoot over to my desktop and show actually a project that Ellen worked on last week, which was a declutter project, clearly. And to give you a sense, a buyer comes in and looks at this room, and two things are coming to mind in a buyer's head. I can tell you after this, seeing this number of times. One is the room looks smaller than it is. It just does. That is one impact, and that absolutely can impact value on a home. The other thing is that buyers think is they've outgrown the size of their fishbowl. If a seller has outgrown their storage, they don't have adequate storage, they've outgrown the size of their fishbowl, how long is it going to take for us to outgrow ours? So those are two things that go through a buyer's mind with clutter. I've seen clutter like this affect sellers in the respect that in different ways, but one is if a seller is in a position where they can't necessarily use their second floor anymore for medical reasons, physical reasons, whatever the case may be, I have seen sellers chained or paralyzed by their clutter where they know they need to find another home. They know they need one floor living, but they can't get past their clutter. And it really, it's unfortunate because it does tend to put a seller into more of a reactive than a proactive mode with the seller of their home. And the reality is, in a declutter process, if you have more of a proactive approach, you can actually take more time to go through things and take more time to enjoy some of the things that you've held on to all this time before potentially letting go of some of it. But to give you an example, so here's a room that, again, a buyer is going to look at and say small, not enough storage. Now, this is one of Ellen's projects from last week. To give you a perspective on 4 hours later, I'm going to actually close out this first one so that it doesn't get in the way. Here is what the room looked like 4 hours later. So as you can see, so now a buyer walks in, they look at this room, it's opened, it's spacious, it gives that feeling of space. People can really envision themselves living there. So clutter really can impact the value on a home. It's definitely worth looking at, especially if you are looking at selling your home. And this is good timing, this webinar, to address this, because we'll get into some tips so you can get going with it right away. So without further ado, speaking of tips, we have 4 tips that you're going to leave this webinar with. So if you want to dive in and get crazy, you can go right to it. So Ellen, I'm going to first start this out by just to give actually just a sense of, so that room took you 4 hours. When you walk into a person's house, how do you price clutter?
Well, I think it's, and this is in general terms. I look at every project and I estimate, and there's always that it depends. So I estimate 4 hours per room to deal with things. So in essence, you could easily get through, if you have your feet to the fire, you can get through an entire house in 1 to 2 weeks.
Okay, now that's obviously you've got someone that's receptive, that's working with you, right? And on board the ship.
Somebody who is very receptive, who equally wants to roll up their sleeves and dig in, because I say to everybody, time is money. So if you're ready to make decisions, let's go to it.
Okay. All right. So this is feasible. So a completely cluttered home within a week or two could be uncluttered and
hit the ground running and ready to get it on the market. Absolutely.
Okay. Well, that works with the timing that we're in. So let's get to it. Let's get right into tips. So what is your first tip for someone who wants to get started with decluttering?
Okay, so my first tip would be, let's start from the top down. Let's take a kitchen as a quick example. Open all your upper cabinets and let's start there. Take a look. Let's zero in, for example, on that upper kitchen cabinet that's full of coffee mugs. So what we want to do is we want to empty them all out from the top down. We want to empty them all out, and we want to have them all out on the counter so that you can peruse them all. Look at them in terms of your best friends, the ones that you see every day. Your secondary line of defense would be, your friends that maybe you see once a month or something like that. And then third level of acquaintances. Look at your coffee mugs in those same terms.
This is feeling very Freudian circle-ish. I learned this in college. Okay. All right. So your mugs are...
You can easily look at, you don't use, chances are you don't use every single thing you have every single day. And chances are, let's, first pass, eliminate everything that's chipped, cracked, broken, for whatever. All right, let's get rid of those. And then just start narrowing it down. So that would be, and actually that's going to segue me right into another tip.
Ooh, tip number 2 alert. Okay.
Yeah. Number 2 alert. So, oh God, where was I going with this?
No, you know what? Actually, I'm going to back you up before you get into tip number 2, because there's a couple things I want to say about this cabinet situation in kitchens, because one thing I have noticed, is that a lot of these cabinets, they go way high off the floor, to a point where that upper cabinet, whether you're physically able or not to reach the top, really is not altogether that functional. So looking at that top cabinet more as potentially a storage place for holiday stuff or things that are outdated, and really taking a look at those cabinets and culling them down, now all of a sudden you have space to put things that maybe you didn't before. And actually getting into that room that I showed before with all the clutter and then without all the clutter, that was not a matter of you just shoving all the stuff that was in the living room into a closet. You found places, from what you said to me, you found places for different things. And some of the places went into your car, from what you were saying, and to Goodwill or to your church. But it's basically keep, Goodwill, garbage, right? Is that kind of...
That's pretty much the 3 categories. Either, so that kind of brings us into tip number 2, is be realistic about what you absolutely need. Because let's face it, you're looking to move. So now is a golden opportunity to minimize down the amount of stuff that you want to pay someone to move. So there's no value in paying somebody to pack and move things that you just don't want, or of no value in your space anymore. So that would be, tip number 1, top down. Tip number 2, really be ruthless and evaluate what you absolutely need and you don't need.
Well, there's 2 things I want to add on to that, actually, which is an interesting point. First of all, whether or not you're planning on moving, because I've seen people who live in a world of anxiety in their homes with clutter and don't intend to move. So even if you're not moving, this is a really productive and healthy exercise.
Absolutely.
But if you are moving, the reality is, just as you said, now you're going to pay movers to move stuff. And even if in the end you choose to not have movers move the stuff, instead you decide, you know what, I don't want to move with this, I'm going to throw it out. Do that at the front end. because that again is giving the buyers a look of more space in your cabinets and in your home. So, use that to your advantage rather than doing that at the end of the process. Do that at the beginning of the process so that your place
Absolutely.
shows that much better during the sale.
It is time so well spent and of such value. It is really, truly, it's unbelievable what value that is to do it up front.
So now we've got tip number 1 is start at the top, work your way down.
Yeah,
Tip number 2 is what do you really need?
right.
Tip number 3, gather like things together.
Gather like things together by all means. When I was working on that room that you showed the pictures of earlier, one of the things that I did in that situation is there were a lot of clothing, articles of clothing in that room that were visible. And so what we did, because we were not working on a bedroom that day, we just gathered all the clothing together and we moved it to where it needed to be ultimately. We will get to that room next up, but for the time being, we gathered like things together. We got all of as we found books in the space, we put all the books in one spot. As we found electronics and office supplies, we gathered all of those in one spot. As we came across clothing, we gathered all of that stuff in one spot. As we came across coats, we were able to empty out a closet and hang them all. So we got those all in one spot. We were able to clear space to dedicate it now to things that were out in that room, so that we established, tip number 3, we established a location for everything to reside.
Now, but in the process of it, right? In the process of it, some other rooms, may have a little bit more of a storm before the calm, right? Because if you're not yet working on a bedroom or you're not yet working on an office, but you need to bring some of the things into that space may get a little bit messier in the interim. But in the end, if you work through it this way, you will end up with the totality of a clean house. If you focus, I think you had mentioned to me at one point, focusing on one room at a time, potentially putting on a timer. You mentioned something like that.
Well, right. If you want to, if you struggle with being distracted, set a timer for yourself. If you're tackling this yourself, set a timer for yourself for, say, an hour. Do not be distracted by your phone. Do not be distracted by emails. Do not be distracted by, as you move clothing out of one room and you put it to where it needs to go into a bedroom. Don't then be distracted by the bedroom. Go back and stay focused one room at a time. So,
okay. Now,
yes,
I think
a lot of other rooms in the house are going to get worse before they get better, but that's part of the process.
okay. And now tip number 4.
Tip number 4.
Don't
Do
buy
not
anything.
buy a thing. Do not buy. It's probably the number 1 question I personally get asked prior to going to somebody's house. What should I do to prepare? And I say, my answer is always absolutely nothing. I am not coming there to judge. I am coming there to help. Do I need to buy things? Absolutely not, because chances are, as we go through things and we eliminate and we downsize and we purge, chances are we are going to empty tubs, empty containers, empty drawers, empty closets, not entirely, but we're going to open up space so that we now have a place for things to reside. And that's the other key thing too, is to identify where everything belongs. Because if somebody, let's say in that situation of the living room, if there are multiple people living in the house and somebody says, oh, well, you're telling me to clean up, but where should I put it? Well, now we're clearly identifying where things reside. So then you can say, oh, all the things for your shoes, okay, that's now in the front hall closet. It's in a little container and it's there. And that's
There's interesting. There's 2 things you brought up with that are very interesting. One is not to buy anything, to organize the house in the beginning of this, in the beginning, because you could end up buying big tubs and need little tubs. Now all of a sudden your tubs themselves are becoming clutter, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
the other part of this is very real, that with clutter, a lot of times what ends up happening is the office becomes a mess. So now all of a sudden things from the office end up in the living room. And this is how this happens, right? This is how the peeling onion just keeps going, because now you've got stuff on the kitchen counter that really belongs in the living room, but now the living room's a mess, even though, so it's this peeling onion that
Yeah.
once you go through it and things actually have a designated place,
Right.
even if the place gets a bit messy, which I believe you said at one point, that organization is not, it's
It's
not
not
tight.
about being neat and tidy. It's about limits and boundaries. So, let's just say, for example, in that picture that you put up earlier, there were, I'm just going to throw out a number, 10 throw blankets. Well, okay, do we really need, or, maybe there were 15. Do we really need 10 to 15 throw blankets, or would you be comfortable with 5 or 6? So but it's your own personal comfort level, but it's establishing limits and boundaries. One of the interesting things that I also like to use, and I know that you like to use this expression too, is a fishbowl. So one of the thing, I don't know if it's just like a little tidbit here. Did you know that goldfish will only grow to the size of the space that they are in, and they will stop? So
I've heard that.
if you put a goldfish in a 5-gallon tank, it'll grow so big and it stops. If you bump that up to a 50-gallon tank, that goldfish is going to grow. So if you think of your house as a goldfish bowl, most people exceed their limits and they're bursting at the seams. So
Yep.
it's about reeling it in and being realistic about what actually fits in the space that you have. And it's important because, as you said, when listing a house to sell, it is so key for people to see that it is spacious and that they can envision themselves in a room, in a house. It has plenty of closet space. It's not bursting at the seam. You have not exceeded the size of your goldfish bowl. You want to be able to see that you can hit the ground running in that space.
It's true. It really, it does make an impact on value. It really can make an impact on value. And it impacts, again, your own life, your anxiety levels, I have people that don't have their friends over regularly because of clutter. I mean, it affects so many different aspects of life that I think you had mentioned at one point too. Start small, even if it's with one pile in the corner, but
Yeah.
start small, right?
Yeah, do what you need to do. I mean, if it is set that timer and open up a kitchen drawer, completely empty it onto the counter. And if that's what's going to get you going and give you the momentum that you need, just by doing one drawer, set a timer for 20 minutes, do that drawer in its entirety, 100%, put it back, and you're done for the day. Move on with the rest of your life. But start small. Set attainable goals for yourself, because otherwise you will frustrate yourself. So
Awesome.
yeah.
Well, Ellen, I really very much appreciate your time. I hope that everyone has found this informative. And again, this is Spring Market Smart Series number 2. Series number 1 was on multiple offers, which is available on my YouTube channel, as well as on Instagram at Hudson Valley Nest. And we will have other series coming up with expert panelists. I hope that this was informative for you. Again, thank you very much for your time. Ellen Kuttner with Simply Organized. Thank
Thank
you,
you,
Ellen.
Sandy. This was fun.
Thanks. Take care, all.
Okay.
Happy cleaning. Bye.
Bye.